Miss Lisa. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you.
So, what do you tell me about yourself?
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about myself. So I moved here about 6 years ago from Boston. So I'm from the East Coast. I have always been a teacher. From when I was little, I used to play being an English teacher. You make little assignments for my brothers and sisters. And so I always knew I wanted to teach and be in the classroom. When I moved here from Boston, I was teaching academic classes. I was at a culinary school, and I was in a 4-year school for teachers of all things, and then an art school. But I had a little bit of a kind of a crisis of conscience, I would say, being in the school system for so long and seeing so many students come to my classes that were just really struggling, and realizing that they lacked the skills and resources in my class to be successful. So I started to really kind of doubt, if it was the right profession for me, if this is what I wanted to be doing. So when I moved to Austin, I was really looking for something to kind of shake up the classroom and shake up just being I guess I would say I'm a kind of like a co-learner, a co-facilitator in the classroom. So I spent about a year just trying out different things, and I finally landed at Austin Community College, and it had changed my whole perspective on teaching. I had worked with adult students before, but not specifically with the adult ed population. So working in ESL and GED, I got to work with such a diverse population, and I was so inspired by the students and the stories that they would bring in their lives, and just the perspectives that I had never come in contact with. And it just kind of reinvigorated me, and it kind of gave me that jolt that I needed to become, I guess, the teacher I am today, but also just really excited and passionate about encountering all of those unique moments that we have in the classroom. So that's me professionally. Is there anything else you want to know about me in general?
In general, I was so inspired how you kept us engaged in class and doing activities.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you describe that, and what style or what motivation you would give to a student to keep them?
Well, I try to think about all of the things that would motivate me in the classroom, but go beyond that about twofold. Because I realize the sacrifices that our students make to be in the classroom. And I know when I was teaching on a Saturday, typically those students, they take it on a Saturday because they have no other time during the week. So just my approach to the classroom is to keep it engaging, to keep it lively, to make it fun, and to make it interesting. If they're going to give up these important parts of their lives, their family or not working, they want to walk out with something that's relevant and useful. So I'm just naturally high energy, and it's a good channel for me in the classroom. So I like to mix things up and make it colorful. But I really find that the different personalities that come into my classroom excite me, and I get caught up in that energy, and it's really hard not to transfer it. And I always believe that teachers set the tone for what happens in the classroom, and if the teacher is just monotonous and just not interested, the students are going to follow suit. So if you bring energy, enthusiasm, care, and just a lot of interest, generally students will return with that. And if they don't, that's okay. I mean, it's about their learning experience, not mine. But I always want to make learning approachable and enjoyable, and hopefully lead them to, another part in their educational journey that doesn't stop at GED, but keeps going and going and going, just like it has for my life.
Yeah, that's very excellent. That's what I got from you. I was like, I should keep going, and writing was not just for GED for me. So right now I'm thinking about doing something else, like writing my biography. So what's your advice for very good students you have or you had before
What's my advice?
as far as reading, writing?
Reading and writing. Realize that it's a process, and it's a process that never ends. And be open to that process and learning about yourself, and be brave, be courageous, and above all else, be tenacious. Don't ever give up. If you get knocked down 100 times, get up 101. That's all that matters. Because there's going to be a lot of people out there saying you can't, right? But you want to listen to the ones that say you can, because that's what makes the big difference. And you'll do it. If you want it, you'll do it, right?
Right.
And I could see that about you in the classroom. You always came in and you always had more than what I assigned and multiple drafts. And I love that because it shows you're hungry. You know, you have to be hungry. And I think a lot of people just get really complacent and say, well, this is what it is, or I'll just get through this. But life's not about that. And I think that the learning process just kind of encapsulates your attitude towards life as well. You know, and if you're engaged and ready to roll with it, you'll discover amazing, uncharted things. And if that keeps you going, you know, there's no stopping you. You can't stop someone who is on a path, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. So how would you describe your writing, or at which point you decided to teach?
Well, my writing, ironically, perhaps, is more academic. So part of me coming here to Texas, I thought I was going to possibly go on the PhD track for English. So I have a master's in English. It translates into English literature here in the States, but it's English Renaissance theory and culture, which is basically British lit and art history. So I initially started on the track as more academic with analysis of historical texts and things like that. But along the way, I just fell in love with teaching. And while I was teaching, you know, the typical, literature, British lit courses, medieval lit courses, I tended to move more towards the kind of compositional studies and looking at rhetoric of memory and how we record historical events in a more general sense. So my writing it's very esoteric in some ways. I'm sure people at UT would, relish it in a very small department. But within a regular comp course, it's not always applicable with that specificity, I suppose. But I do still enjoy reading the modernist poets are my favorite, and anything that has really keen analysis about human behavior. Because again, I'm kind of a little history sci-fi buff, so I always enjoy that.
Oh, that's nice.
See my Doctor Who over there?
Yeah. So which poetry or history author you
Are my favorites?
Yeah.
Well, when I was studying, Elizabeth I was my favorite historical figure. I don't know if you know about her. We know about Henry VIII, right? He was famous for chopping off his wives' heads. Not all of them, but some of them. So his daughter, Elizabeth, became one of the longest ruling monarchs of the British Empire. And she was female, largely unheard of. And she accomplished many things that men couldn't accomplish. So she was always my idol. But she was also very clever at maintaining her control over her realm, and by not marrying. And she had this huge kind of propagandistic program and how to legitimize it. And I thought she was just brilliant. So she's my favorite historical figure. That time period, early modern studies are also my favorite literature. But I do like modernists, like T.S. Eliot. He's one of my favorite modernists. And I'm trying to get more into contemporary literature. It seems like dystopian literature really resonates with this age, so I'm kind of moving in that direction too, with all that's going on.
Yeah, well, that's good to know about you. It's amazing. The one thing I want to know, what's your expectation from the student? Like, when you have like presentation in class, website, and activities,
Yeah.
what do you expect?
Well, I expect the best, of course. And again, it's different if you're looking at adult ed versus the credited courses in college. So with adult education, we don't have any grades, right? Your grade is basically to pass the GED and then move on from there. So with that credential in those classrooms, my expectation is that students doing all the work that has been given to him or her, and then also pushing him or herself beyond just a little bit, that little bit of threshold to really do better. Within a college course, of course, we have all sorts of objectives and grades and quizzes and those kinds of things. So it really would depend on that class. But I think typically the signature of a inquisitive mind is someone, again, who's looking beyond that. And that's, again, another thing why I really appreciate having you in my class is that you weren't just doing what I was asking you to do, but you're thinking, okay, what more can I do? How can I connect this in other ways? How can I make this relevant and really make it stick? Because that's going to be a lifelong learner, right? And that's going to be someone who, in the culinary field, we call it the it factor. I think in education they're calling it grit. You know, there's this kind of indefinable term of a characteristic that you have that just says that you're gonna go for it and you're not gonna give up. That's kind of what I expect from my students, just to do their best, but to be brave and be bold. That's a lot. I know I have high expectations, high standards, unrealistic, I'm told at times.
So, with your expectations, did you have like a student who is not expecting this from the language art class?
Oh yeah.
Or just wants to do, let's say, classical way of learning?
Yes, of course.
And how would you deal with these situations?
Well, I know with adult ed students, there's a reason that they're in my class. So with that said, it's because the traditional model of education did not work for them. And I think, there's this misconception that adult ed students can't do the work, because they didn't finish high school, but usually it's a life event that has kept them from reaching those goals. No sort of, cognitive deficiency, no sort of lack of willpower or desire. So part of coming into the adult ed classroom for those students is kind of facing some of that again and saying, oh my God, here's the structure that I didn't survive in before, how am I going to do this now? And just kind of instilling confidence in them and saying, you know what, you can do it. It didn't work before because of conditions that are no longer present, hopefully. But now you have a fresh perspective. You know the relevance of it because you've been in the world of work and you know that education is needed to succeed. And then oftentimes they have things that are motivating them now, like children or family and friends, that make them unstoppable. So it's kind of tapping into that and saying, hey, the way things were in the past, we're going to kind of change and reframe that, but also try to tap into their strengths and bring those strengths into the classroom to see this more traditional model in a different way. A lot of times what they bring with them, that baggage of, well, we used to do it this way, or this was the only way to do it, hopefully exposing them to different models and different options allows them to open up a little bit and explore. And that's what college is about, right? It's about seeing different options and figuring out what works for you. But that openness is something they have to be ready for. You can't force someone to want to learn, to want to grow. But if they come ready and hungry, I've got a smorgasbord for them. Yeah, so I think it's more of an art, and there are skills that you, of course, employ in the classroom and different, we say, toolboxes that we draw from as teachers, but you really got to find where the students are and try to meet them there and then bring them up to those expectations. And I find often once they start having successes in the classroom, they want to keep feeling that way. They want to keep being successful. But if they keep experiencing failure, they're going to avoid that and they're not going to want to come. So we try to create an environment where they can be successful. But of course, you know, they've got to bring their hard work, and they got to bring, we say, their A game with them as well. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But then, for me, I was like, no, I have to keep going.
Yes.
But at some point, how would you feel if the student said like, I failed in this test, or I failed in this class, and I'm not coming again, or would this disappoint you?
Well, I'd want to probably talk with the student and find out why you're not coming. Is it because of that individual failure? And then look at, okay, was it just this material here? Is there something else going on that's fueling this outside of the classroom? We do have an advising component with adult ed that is implied in our job. You know, we're not trained advisors, but we do have to try to look into what's causing the student to make this decision. Sometimes it's very cut and dry and just, okay, the student is just focused on other things right now and is not coming back. If it's just that assignment, or if it's a particular skill set, we can work on that, overcome that. But again, it comes back to what we were saying before, is that the student has to want it. And if the student doesn't want it, doesn't matter how much I want it for the students, I can't do it for you, right?
Yeah.
I can put you on that path, but ultimately you've got to do the work, right? I can give you advice and say, okay, this is how we organize and structure, and this is a thesis, and
Right.
but you've got to do it, right? I can't sit down next to you on the test and say, okay, it's answer's D. We'll get to that point, but you got to do it on your own.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is just counseling and trying to get them there, but ultimately they have to take that plunge. And if they're not willing to walk off that cliff, that's kind of up to them. And I mean, I try not to take it personally. When I first started teaching, yeah, it used to keep me up at night. Like, why can't I get through to this student? What am I doing wrong? Won't you know? But now, just like, okay, well, that person needs space, and maybe you'll come back when they're ready. But not everyone's ready. Not everyone's ready for it, so.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I was like so glad to be in your class and coming every day.
Yes.
And waking up, and I was so eager to come to present my writing, or read, or
Yes.
go on the board, or do something.
And how do you feel that you were in relation to your classmates? Do you think that they were equally enthusiastic?
Pretty much, yeah, because we all come to class and collaborate with each other.
Yes.
Work in
Yeah.
the groups
Yeah.
and all that. It gave me more insights about what I need to write about or read, and figure out my weaknesses, work on them.
And that's important when you can build community in the classroom. So the student's not just motivating him or herself, but you guys are motivating each other. And that's even more powerful than anything I can do, right? To have a community of your peers that are there to help you. Because, you know, I can help you with certain things and I know a framework, but I might not know what you went through to get to that point. I might not be able to explain it in the same way that another student could. So it's important to really build that network and rely on those people, as I'm sure they rely on you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then most of the time I was like relying on you to check my
Right,
writing,
sure.
and
But then I would rely on you to explain other things to the students in the class, right? And then they would come to you during the peer review and stuff like that and talk. And so it kind of has a trickle-down effect. And this really does mirror the whole writing process, right? We don't just write and just put it out there. We need to rely on each other to help us to draft and revise and make it clearer. And that community is essential. You can't write in a vacuum. So having that feedback is important.
I agree. Thank you, Miss Carlo.
You're welcome. And if you have any questions, you always know where I am, right? Door's always open. I always say that it's the greatest compliment of a teacher to have a student come back to her in some way.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be one of your students
Yeah.
one day, and seeing you today,
Yeah.
and I hope I see you in the future.
Oh, I'm always going to be around. I am always going to be around. And let me know about your successes. Right when you're conquering the world, just remember the little people right here. Well, thank you. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure
thank
speaking with you.